In the year 2287, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, now known simply as the Commonwealth, is filled with threats that constantly prey on the local populace. From roaming gangs of raiders and mercenaries, to bands of bloodthirsty supermutants and waves of feral ghouls, as well as the hostile wildlife. But perhaps the most insidious threat of all is the Institute, a group of scientists and researchers nestled deep underground in their very own futuristic utopia, using the Commonwealth and its inhabitants as experiments in their selfish desires to redefine mankind, particularly in the creation of synths, artificial intelligent beings made to look and act like real humans, while at the same time being stronger, smarter, and even deadlier. A faction known as the Railroad seeks to free these synths, as they view the Institute as slave masters to what they believe is sentient AI. But by focusing only on helping these synths, the Railroad ends up ignoring all the problems and struggles that real humans face on a daily basis. This leaves only two other factions as the best hope for the everyday people of the Commonwealth: the Minutemen and the Brotherhood of Steel. But of these two, which one is truly the best? Now before we get on with the rest of the video, I want to briefly lay out the criteria and format of it. This video is not a matchup of who would win in a fight between the Brotherhood of Steel and the Minutemen, but simply taking a look at which faction would be the best to support in order to destroy the Institute and ultimately help out the people of the Commonwealth. No faction overhaul mods will be used or taken into account for either one, so each will be compared as they are default in the game, with the exception that we will assume the sole survivor has actually accepted Preston Garvey's offer to be General of the Minutemen, and has helped them retake the castle, and unlock the ability to create artillery, as well as having a few settlements pledging their support for the Minutemen. Both factions will go head-to-head with each other in 6 categories, those being equipment, unique asset, training and experience, values and principles, and organizational structure. The winner of each category will be given the edge, simply meaning that that faction has an advantage over the other in that specific category, although neither faction could have a clear advantage over the other, in which case it would be considered a draw. Now let's take a look at a brief overview of each, starting with the Minutemen. The exact date that the Minutemen were founded is unknown, but it was some time after the Great War. The organization rose to prominence in the year 2180, when they successfully defended Diamond City from an attack by super mutants. After gaining enough resources, the Minutemen would go on to take control of Fort Independence, which was from then on known as the Castle. They established an armory at the castle and built a large broadcast tower in the middle of it. Through their own radio station, which they called Radio Freedom, the Minutemen were able to stay in touch with various settlements throughout the Commonwealth, allowing them to send and receive alerts from settlements in distress and needing help. At one point, the Minutemen grew large enough that they attempted to establish the Commonwealth Provisional Government. But these hopes were shattered in the 2230s, when an Institute synth infiltrated the meeting to establish this new government, and killed all the settlement's representatives, putting an end to the CPG before it could get off the ground. The CPG massacre would be just one of a series of defeats that the Minutemen would experience over the next few decades. They would go on to lose the castle in the 2240s, and later their last leader, General Joe Becker, would be killed, causing great internal strife within the organization as they couldn't agree on a predecessor. The final blow would be the Quincy Massacre, when the Minutemen were betrayed by one of their own, and the organization would effectively be destroyed by the mercenaries known as the Gunners, leaving one Preston Garvey as the last true Minuteman. However, all is not lost for the Minutemen, if the sole survivor chooses to take up the mantle as leader in general, rebuilding the faction by helping out settlements and convincing them to rejoin the Minutemen, and going on to retake the castle and its still intact armory. Under the sole survivor's leadership, the Minutemen could very well unite the settlements under their flag and defeat the greatest threat to the Commonwealth, the Institute. The Brotherhood of Steel has quite an extensive history in the Fallout universe. But for the purposes of this video, I'll only be doing an overview of the East Coast chapter. The East Coast chapter of the Brotherhood arrived in the Washington, D.C. area, now known as the Capital Wasteland, sometime in the late 2250s. The Brotherhood, led by Elder Owen Lyons, established a base at what was once known as the Pentagon called the Citadel. From there, they collected pre-war technology per their original mission orders from the West Coast chapter. However, Elder Lyons also felt that it was the Brotherhood's duty to protect the innocent people of the Capital Wasteland. And in this belief, collecting advanced pre-war technology became secondary to the new objective of being defenders and protectors of the innocent. This caused the separation between the West Coast and East Coast Brotherhood into two separate and distinct chapters. In the year 2277, a faction known as the Enclave would begin their assault and pacification of all who stood in their way in the Capital Wasteland. They were able to capture the Jefferson Memorial, where civilian scientists were working on Project Purity as a way to bring purified clean water to the wasteland. The Brotherhood of Steel fought the Enclave, and with the help of a vault dweller known as the Lone Wanderer, were able to not only destroy the Enclave's base of operations at Raven Rock, but also recapture the Jefferson Memorial and bring purified water to the Capital Wasteland. The Brotherhood would then later go on to finish off the Enclave at Adams Air Force Base. Shortly after the Brotherhood defeated the Enclave, Elder Owen Lyons would pass away, leaving his daughter Sarah Lyons as the new Elder. However, her leadership would be short-lived, as she was later killed in battle. The Brotherhood would then go through a series of incompetent leaders until finally, in 2283, Arthur Maxson was appointed Elder of the East Coast chapter at age 16, making him the youngest in Brotherhood history. Maxson would re-establish contact with the West Coast chapter in 2287, and actively receive support from them, as well as reuniting the Brotherhood with a group of former members known as the Outcasts. The Brotherhood would receive information from scouts sent to the Commonwealth about pre-war technology that could be collected there, as well as the threat of supermutants, raiders, and of course, the Institute. Maxson and the bulk of his Brotherhood forces would travel to the Commonwealth aboard a giant airship called the Prydwen, armed with technology rediscovered and re-engineered to achieve the Brotherhood's mission. That mission being the destruction of the Institute, and ultimately bringing order to the Commonwealth. First, we'll take a look at the standard equipment that soldiers of each faction are outfitted with, starting with the Minutemen. Because the Minutemen are a volunteer militia made up of people from the various settlements throughout the Commonwealth, there really isn't much in the way of standardization in terms of the equipment they use. Most of the time, it is simply just a matter of a Minutemen soldier using whatever they already own, from the clothes on their back to the weapons in their hands. It could range from a simple surveyor outfit and pipe gun, to army fatigues attached with combat armor and carrying a laser musket. Although there does seem to be some attempts by the organization to standardize their equipment, with apparel such as the Minutemen outfit and hat, or the unique Colonial General's uniform. In addition, some personnel are equipped with flare guns, allowing them to call in Minutemen reinforcements from any nearby settlements or patrols. The Brotherhood of Steel are the exact opposite of the Minutemen, as they do have standardized equipment based on one's role and rank within the organization. The most common uniform worn by various ranks are the Brotherhood fatigues. This outfit comes with plenty of pouches to store ammo and other supplies on the person. It also comes with a standard vest to help resist energy weapons, and some rope which can be used for a variety of applications. It even comes in different colors in order to separate specialties, such as medical fatigues being white, and those with the rank of Lancer or Captain being a light blue. Field scribes also wear a similar uniform, but it comes with extra backpacks in order to collect pre-war technology and carry other supplies. Those scribes that specialize in engineering are equipped with a welding helmet and engineer's armor. While not as protective to the wearer as the fatigues, the engineer's armor allows these scribes to carry all the tools needed for keeping vehicles and weapons in working condition. Scribes specialized in science and research wear a uniform with a couple of unique features to help with said lab research, those being a collar which can mount a magnifying lens, as well as a sort of analyzer device on the back. It even comes with a cowl and goggles. And finally, Brotherhood Knights who see a lot of action in the field will wear a type of underarmor that allows them to attach various pieces of leather or metal combat armor onto them. This under-armor uniform gives the knight great flexibility of movement, while also using the extra armored pieces for protection against both ballistic and energy weapons. And it allows the wearer to more easily enter and interface with standard T-60 power armor in the Brotherhood's arsenal. Outside of the uniforms and armor, Brotherhood troops are typically outfitted with energy weapons, the most common being variants of the laser rifle and pistol. but those wearing power armor such as knights or paladins will carry around heavy weapons such as the Gatling laser or minigun, allowing them to bring considerably more firepower with them on patrols or missions. I think it's pretty clear that the Brotherhood of Steel are better equipped than the Minutemen. This being simply due to the Brotherhood's primary goals and values, that being the collection of pre-war technology and repurposing it for their own use. Their soldiers being equipped with energy weapons and power armor allow them to go toe-to-toe or even surpass any hostiles that they meet out on their research patrols, as well as engage with Institute synths and coursers, which are also similarly equipped. The Minutemen being typically outfitted with more civilian clothes, which don't offer as much protection compared to the Brotherhood's uniforms, and less powerful ballistic weapons means their troops would be at a disadvantage when fighting even the basic Gen 2 synths of the Institute. While it is true that the sole survivor, acting as the Minutemen General, could arm the militia with better equipment, this is a process that would certainly take some time that the Institute is not likely to allow the Minutemen to have to begin with, as anything that the Institute perceives as a growing threat to it would immediately be taken out, regardless of the General's relationship with certain members of the Institute. Edge, Brotherhood of Steel. Next, we'll take a look at a unique asset that each faction has in its arsenal, that is exclusive to them, and that can be used to help in fighting the Institute and other hostile groups and creatures throughout the Commonwealth. By far the most unique asset in the Brotherhood's arsenal is the giant patriotic killing machine that is Liberty Prime. However, when the Brotherhood first enters the Commonwealth, Liberty Prime is non-operational. It first needs to be rebuilt and rearmed, and only specific scientists such as Madison Lee of the Institute have the knowledge and technical know-how to do the job. And there is no guarantee that she will help the Brotherhood build it, at least not without some convincing from the sole survivor. Therefore, instead of Liberty Prime, I think it's much more appropriate to use the Brotherhood's vertibirds for this category, as they have access to these vehicles in their arsenal immediately upon entering the Commonwealth. The vertibird allows the Brotherhood to quickly deploy troops almost anywhere in the Commonwealth, as well as pick up troops that find themselves a long distance away from the Boston airport. Some Brotherhood squads are supplied with signal flares that show vertibird pilots where to land in order to pick up troops behind enemy lines. It can carry up to 6 personnel, those being 2 pilots, 1 door gunner, and 3 other troops, 2 of which can be wearing power armor. The vertibirds used by the Brotherhood are uniquely modified with a docking hook at the top of the aircraft, allowing them to dock with the Pridwin. The vertibird isn't just a transport vehicle though, it can also provide fire support for ground troops, armed with a minigun mounted on the left-hand side of the vehicle, able to mow down anything from feral ghouls to super mutants, and 2 more machine guns at the front of the vehicle below the cockpit. The vertibird is the only reliable form of air travel in the Commonwealth, and a constant sign of the Brotherhood's presence. For the Minutemen, their unique asset lies hidden away in the castle armory, but once acquired, give the faction substantial firepower with which to rain down on their enemies. That asset, of course, is artillery. The artillery piece is a mortar that can be built at any settlement allied with the Minutemen. The mortar only requires a crew of 1 to operate, and fires 5 cannonballs on the targeted location during a fire mission. High-ranking Minutemen personnel, such as the General, use smoke grenades in order to mark the location of an artillery strike. The mortars themselves have a wide range, with the maximum being about a 5-sector radius on the Pip-Boy's map. If multiple artillery guns are within firing range of a signal flare, then all of them will fire ordnance down on the target location. The shells themselves are highly accurate, exploding very close to where the flare lands on the ground. The explosions themselves are powerful enough to wipe out most hostiles on the map, from human raiders and ghouls to super mutants and crazed robots. If the Minutemen can get more settlements to support them, they could potentially build enough artillery guns to have the whole Commonwealth covered, allowing them to call in artillery on targets anywhere they want. Both factions' unique assets are good for helping out the people of the Commonwealth. Artillery able to destroy any hostiles, such as raiders and super mutants at range, and vertibirds allowing the Brotherhood to take the fight directly to said raider or super mutant camps. But as far as which one is best for fighting the Institute, I think the vertibirds are better than artillery. The issue with artillery is that it's stationary, making it much more vulnerable to attacks by the Institute, especially since they could teleport synth soldiers right on top of the mortar itself, allowing them to take out the crewmen and destroy the gun. The other issue with artillery is the roughly 3 minutes it takes to be able to call in another barrage on the target, especially if the first barrage misses its mark because the enemies moved out of the way before the shells could land. And of course the artillery has to be within range of the target to begin with, or else it is useless. While vertibirds may not necessarily be the strongest aircraft, as they can be shot down given enough concentrated fire on them, they can be called in and land almost anywhere in the Commonwealth. And because they can fly anywhere, they are able to provide fire support to Brotherhood troops in the field, and would be more difficult for the Institute to shoot down due to their mobility. Most importantly, they allow the Brotherhood to bring the fight to their enemies, whether it be the Institute, gunners, raiders, or other. While artillery is certainly great for defending settlements and raining down a barrage of shells on targets out in the open, they don't have any effect on enemies inside buildings. Neither do the vertibirds, but what they can do is bring Brotherhood troops to said buildings to clear out the interiors, thereby allowing them to completely dislodge any hostiles using them as homes or bases. In short, while artillery may have reach, the vertibirds have flexibility, and when it comes to defeating the Institute and securing the Commonwealth, I think flexibility is more important than reach. Edge, Brotherhood of Steel. While it's one thing to be well equipped and have a unique asset at one's disposal, it's another thing to have the training to know how to properly use them, as well as just general experience in combat and understanding the land that one's forces are fighting on. For the Brotherhood of Steel, they certainly have the training aspect nailed down, given many of the members' strict military upbringing. New recruits start their training immediately after initiation into the Brotherhood. Though some may end up becoming scribes who don't see much combat in the field, they still need to know how to properly defend themselves if the situation calls for it. On the journey to the Commonwealth aboard the Pridwin, Brotherhood soldiers spent their time aboard keeping the ship airborne, running drills, fixing and cleaning weapons, and other activities to keep them in top shape and prepared for whatever dangers they would encounter upon arrival in the Commonwealth, both known and unknown. And of course, not all of their soldiers are recruits, as they have some veteran members who have faced the horrors of the capital wasteland, as well as those that participated in the war with the Enclave, able to use that experience to lead their initiates into battle. While the Minutemen may not necessarily have an official training program like the Brotherhood, they are still very capable soldiers in their own right. One has to keep in mind that the Minutemen are mostly made up of people who have spent their whole lives growing up in the Commonwealth. This is their home, and they already understand what dangers are out there in the ruins of Boston, or the wilderness surrounding the city. The people of the Commonwealth have to remain at a constant vigilance from attacks by all kinds of enemies, from psychotic raiders to hulking super mutants. This means constantly having to keep your skills up in all aspects of survival, from farming the land to keeping your weapons and equipment in reliable shape. And unlike the Brotherhood, who are arriving in an unknown land, the Minutemen know their way around the Commonwealth. This includes knowledge of the roads, settlement locations, checkpoints, flora and fauna, resources, and more. While the Brotherhood certainly have the training, equipment, and experience to go into largely unknown hostile territory like the Commonwealth and win, the Minutemen being made up of people who actually live in the Commonwealth means that they have a sort of home turf advantage, as they understand the land, roads, and other important locations. Overall, I don't think either faction really has an outright advantage over the other in this category. I think the Brotherhood has better training, especially in combat and military tactics, but the Minutemen are also capable of holding their own in combat as well, and have a home field advantage. So with that, I'm calling it a draw. Both the Minutemen and Brotherhood have their own unique set of values and principles that they adhere to, and both claim to care about the people of the Commonwealth and want to do what's best for them. But whether they actually do what they claim, or the way in which they are trying to bring about those claims, may not always be so clear. The Minutemen themselves were founded on the values of unifying the Commonwealth, and the principle of protecting its people at a minute's notice, with the ultimate goal of bringing about peace. For a while, the Minutemen were able to mostly live up to their founding values, before their collapse at Quincy. With the leadership of the sole survivor, under the guidance of Preston Garvey, the Minutemen continue to provide support for settlements, mostly in the form of defense from attacks. But they also help provide work at the settlements for people wandering the wasteland who are looking for a place to call home, as well as establishing trade routes, recruiting new members into the militia, and rescuing kidnapped settlers from raiders or mutants. The Minutemen do all this without asking for anything in return, other than for the people of those settlements to consider joining them and contributing to their cause. And if the Minutemen are the ones to assault the Institute, they make it a point to sound the evacuation alarm in an attempt to reduce the number of casualties, and even offer to resettle surviving Institute refugees they find out in the Commonwealth. Unlike the Minutemen, the Brotherhood wasn't founded on the idea of protecting and unifying the Commonwealth, especially since they aren't even originally from the area. Under the leadership of Elder Maxon, the East Coast Brotherhood's primary goal is similar to that of the West Coast chapter, which is the collection of pre-war technology and the destruction of those who would attempt to, in their view, abuse such technology. As far as the Brotherhood is concerned, the Institute is abusing this technology by creating synths, which are capable of being stronger and smarter than any human, and therefore should be destroyed. The Brotherhood also do not hesitate to kill any mutant abominations that are a threat to humanity, such as super mutants or feral ghouls. However, in focusing solely on the Institute and the collection of pre-war technology, the Brotherhood doesn't make that much effort to actually interact with the people of the Commonwealth. They don't actively help or offer help to settlements. And in some cases, they may actually hinder these settlements by having the sole survivor go and convince the local farmers to donate a portion of their crops to the Brotherhood. This could involve simply politely asking, or through threat of force. Also, unlike the Minutemen, the Brotherhood are more prone to preemptive strikes on other organizations or people who may not be a direct threat to them, such as with the destruction of the railroad or the killing of a former Institute scientist named Virgil. And while the sole survivor can sound the evacuation alarm during the Brotherhood's assault on the Institute, they don't put any real emphasis on doing so, since as far as they're concerned, anyone even associated with the organization shouldn't be given the opportunity to live. The Brotherhood definitely lives up to their primary mission of seeing out the destruction of the Institute, and doing so does help out the people of the Commonwealth. However, their secondary goal seems to focus more on the collection of pre-war technology, most of which is weapons, and that overall helping out the people of the Commonwealth is only something they do when it benefits them personally. I think it's pretty clear that the Minutemen are the ones that consistently live up to the values and principles that they claim to champion. Everything they do revolves around helping the people of the Commonwealth, whether it's supporting settlements and protecting trade routes, to combating the Institute. Edge, Minutemen. Each faction has their own unique way of organizing itself, whether it's through a single leader, a council, or other. For the Minutemen, they only have a single leader, the General. The General leads troops into battle, helps establish defenses at settlements, and assigning tasks to settlers. How the sole survivor ends up becoming the General is quite simple. Preston Garvey, who is the last Minutemen soldier the sole survivor meets, just bestows the title of General onto him or her. Essentially, the General has complete control over every aspect of the Minutemen. If the sole survivor is a benevolent general who upholds the values of the Minutemen, then this gives them a strong leader that can rally a lot of support for their cause. The downside to this, however, is that there isn't any established chain of command. If the Minutemen general is killed, then all those who are under his or her command have to get together and appoint a new one. Likewise, if the general strays away from upholding the Minutemen's values, then it might be difficult to replace him or her without the faction splitting apart and causing a civil war within itself. The Brotherhood of Steel also has a single leader, that being the Elder. As mentioned for the East Coast Brotherhood at this time, Arthur Maxon is the leader, but they do have a policy called the Chain That Binds. This is basically just a chain of command that requires all Brotherhood members to obey a superior's orders without skipping ranks. Although the Brotherhood doesn't always adhere to this chain of command, the fact that it exists shows how much of an emphasis the organization puts on order and stability. For example, if Elder Maxon were to be killed, then the next in line to become Elder would be Lancer Captain Kales. And after Kales, it would most likely be either Proctor Quinlan or maybe even Paladin Dance. If the other high-ranking members of the Brotherhood are not in total agreement on who the next leader should be, then they will put it to a vote, or the Elder Council from Lost Hills on the West Coast can just appoint one. And if an Elder has proven themselves to be incompetent of the role of leadership, then he or she will have to step down and allow the members to appoint a new leader. As for Elder Maxon himself, he is a descendant of the original founder of the Brotherhood of Steel, Roger Maxon. At the time of the events of Fallout 4, he is a young, capable, and idealistic leader. He is highly respected amongst the Brotherhood and feared by its enemies. However, he can take his idolism to the extreme, such as with ordering the sole survivor to kill his most loyal soldier, Paladin Danz, after finding out that he was a synth. And while he claims to care about the people of the Commonwealth, the actions that his Brotherhood take don't necessarily line up with his words. While the Minutemen could be a strong and formidable faction that can fight the Institute and unite the Commonwealth, the issue is that it all hinges on the sole survivor remaining alive as the general. If the sole survivor is killed, then there is no one to replace him or her, and it is very likely that this could cause the entire faction to collapse due to infighting. This was the same reason for the Minutemen's initial collapse and betrayal years before during the Quincy Massacre. With the loss of their general, the Minutemen would be hard-pressed to maintain the support of local settlements, let alone take on the Institute. The sole survivor, as their general, may be their greatest strength, but it is also their greatest weakness. While the loss of Elder Maxid would be a huge blow to the Brotherhood, it isn't going to cause the entire East Coast chapter to collapse. This is thanks to the strict chain of command that the Brotherhood maintain at all times, which would allow them to continue their fight against the Institute, and perhaps even put in an elder who does more to help the people of the Commonwealth compared to Maxid. Edge, Brotherhood of Steel. Now that we've covered all the categories, it's time to do a quick recap. The Brotherhood of Steel would claim the first victory with their superior equipment, and then continue to press the advantage with their unique asset, the Vertibird, allowing them to take the fight anywhere in the Commonwealth. But they would be stopped in their tracks by the Minutemen, whose training and experience matches that of the Brotherhood's. The Minutemen would then go on to claim their first win by living up to the values and principles of protecting the people of the Commonwealth at a minute's notice. However, the Brotherhood would take back the initiative with their solid and reliable organizational structure. With all that said, this leaves us with one final question. Which faction is the best for the Commonwealth?
Mission: destruction of any and all Chinese communists.
Winner, Brotherhood of Steel. It was pretty clear that the equipment and vehicles in the Brotherhood arsenal definitely made them the best for fighting and destroying the Institute. While the Minutemen's equipment and artillery guns certainly give them the ability to defend themselves from attacks by the Institute or other hostiles in the Commonwealth, I just don't see them actually having the ability to bring the fight to the Institute or other Raider outposts or super mutant camps, when they are constantly having to hold the line and protect all the settlements under their flag. The sole survivor's leadership as general would only get them so far, and that is assuming he or she even lives long enough. And for me, that really is the biggest issue and why I think the Brotherhood is also the best for the Commonwealth. The Minutemen are far too reliant on a single person. While the sole survivor is certainly a strong and respectable leader, they are not the God Emperor. Elder Maxon isn't either, but he doesn't need to be, thanks to the Brotherhood's strict chain of command and adherence to military discipline. And though Maxon and his Brotherhood may not do much in the way of directly helping the people of the Commonwealth, their actions overall do still inadvertently help them. The constant patrols and vertibird flyovers that the Brotherhood does throughout the region, while also collecting technology, allow them to take the fight directly to the enemy. This gives the farmers more time to focus on building up their settlements and growing their crops, instead of constantly worrying about defending themselves from raids. It would also make the roads safer for caravans to travel on. The Brotherhood can even recruit from the local populace as well, which would hopefully allow them to build up a better reputation with the people of the Commonwealth, and prevent the Brotherhood from resorting to tactics such as intimidating farmers to donate their crops. Of course, being the best does not mean that they are perfect. But overall, I think the Brotherhood still are the right balance between the ideals and goals that they want to achieve, and actually having the necessary capabilities and equipment to actually achieve them. But what do you guys think? Do you agree that the Brotherhood is the best for the Commonwealth? Or do you still think the Minutemen are? Were there other categories that I could have taken into consideration that might have made an impact on the outcome? Let me know in the comments. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hope to see you in the next one.